Greetings, everyone. This Monday night, welcome to the Hudson Valley Squares. I am your host, Pete Pardo, here on Sea of Tranquility. We've got another very cool show today. We've got everybody raise their hands when I call them. Mr. Ryan Skow at the top, Nick Franco in the middle, Steve Keeler in the middle, and down anchor in the bottom, Mr. Chris Allo. Greetings, everyone. Good evening.
What's up?
What's up, Pete?
What's happening, guys? So we've got a very interesting topic here today. This one is has been requested by Mr. Skow. So we've each picked 3 albums that we dig that are basically concept albums, or at least most of the album might be a concept album, but based on a book, a literary piece, a movie, a film, a TV show, or a comic book. So basically not necessarily an original concept by the band, but one that they borrowed from what I just mentioned and made an album out of it. So this proved to be fairly difficult for a bunch of us. And so we're each going to give you 3 choices, and maybe we'll tell you just a little bit about where the concept came from, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the album, why we dig it, and all that good stuff. So we're going to start at the bottom today. Mr. Allo, Mr. Keeler, Mr. Franco, Mr. Skow, and then myself. So Chris, kick us off with your first choice.
Okay, all right. In 1990, I went to the movies to see a movie that I didn't know anything about, because back then you didn't have much to go by other than maybe like a Fangoria or something. And it was a movie called Nightbreed, and I didn't know what to expect other than it was directed by Clive Barker, and I really loved his Hellraiser movie. And Nightbreed was awesome. It's based on a book or a short story called Cabal, and it's just Monster City, just rubber monsters everywhere. And it's a story about, Midian is the city that they live in, and the monsters really aren't all that bad, and there's some hokey stuff to it. But I love the movie. I've seen it a ton of times. I've played it at my Hudson Horror Show. And in 2000, Cradle of Filth did a record called Midian, which was based on the book and the album, the movie from Clive Barker, and some of his other works as well. And it's a really good record. It still holds up. Cradle still, even though there's been a million different guys in the band, I think they still have it. But this is, looking back, this is one of their better albums. This was a huge record for them in the States. People kind of forget how big Cradle was in the early 2000s. I mean, I remember seeing them on this tour at the Hammerstein Ballroom, which I think holds 3,000 people, and I mean the place was fucking mobbed. So it was a big record for them. It's still a really good record, and I still really dig Nightbreed. And if you like Nightbreed, you can get the regular cut, the director's cut, and now I just got the 3-hour and 20-minute ultimate cut. So yeah, I like Nightbreed, and that's my pick, Midian from Cradle of Filth.
So it wouldn't be Chris Allo if he didn't have multiple copies of that film, right?
Oh, I have the Laserdisc, the VHS, the DVD. I got the action figures somewhere. Yeah, it's terrible.
So my question is, do you have multiple copies of Midian as well?
Shockingly, I don't think so. I think this was the only one. I mean, I got 4 copies of Cruelty and the Beast, but I think this is the only one, because I don't think they did any kind of special ones or digipacks or whatever. I mean, they might have, maybe I missed out.
That's a first.
Yeah. But it's a good record. I like it.
Good choice. All right, next up, Mr. Keeler. What do you got?
Mr. Keeler did not play by the rules again, because you just listed all the topics. My topic of this band that I'm using now is based on actual real life activities, wars. And I'm going with a band called Sabaton, power metal band from Sweden that Skow does not like. Making a band, even though there's a lot of people who like him and are going to be upset with him for making that face. And the album is Careless Rex. It's a concept album based on the rise and fall of the Swedish Empire under the monarch of Charles XII, and it gives that the title. The songs like God With Us, Gott mit uns, which is a 1631 battle of Breitenfeld, which was the start of the 30-year war. If we think we have it bad in the United States now, in the 1600s, there was a 30-year war in Europe. And the 30 years were from 1618 to 1648. 8 million people perished. Over 60% of the population of Germany perished during these wars. And Sabaton tells a story of that era in the 1600s, and like many good songs about battles and historic stuff that people just don't know anything about. I mean, they did a survey a few years ago I was reading about, where people were asked what the Holocaust was in World War II, and most people didn't even know what it was. And, you know, with the whole cancel culture thing going on, whether you like it or not, people need to remember stuff like this. And Sabaton, Careless Rex, not based on a comic book or a movie, but so I did go out of bounds with this, but Pete kind of said I could use it. And my pick is Sabaton, Careless Rex from 2012.
Sounds good. All right, Nick, you're up.
Awesome. So the source material that I'm about to talk about, I really had no relationship with before this album came out, but the album was so good that it made me interested in the source material, which is a comic book titled Spawn, and the band is Iced Earth, and the album is 1996's The Dark Saga, which was based entirely on the material in this comic. And phenomenal cover, one of the most, you know, really unforgettable covers. And just, you know, for fans, a lot of the fans here, I'm sure, are aware of Iced Earth, and this to me is one of their best albums. I mean, it's flawless from back to front. And you know, Spawn was a movie that the movie did okay. I don't own the movie or anything like that, and it was okay. But Iced Earth, with the wonderful voice of Matt Barlow, who could make you interested in like baking cookie instructions or something, if that's what the lyrics were about, really got you into this story, which, you know, involves everything from you know, a guy dying and his wife, like, you know, marrying with his best friend, but the guy that's dead is like not really dead. You know, he's able to witness all of this, and he loves both of them, and it breaks his heart. And oh man, really really emotive stuff. And you know, the album has everything. Songs like Violate, which are really thrashy and heavy, and then ballads like I Died for You, and then the Suffering trilogy at the end, culminating in A Question of Heaven with, you know, really epic, grandiose music. So it got me interested in Spawn a bit, but this album by Iced Earth, one of the coolest concept albums, you know, that you could get, and released at a time when, like, you know, grandiose epic metal was at its commercial low tide in America anyway. But I think that album did very well, and it's very fondly remembered by Iced Earth fans.
That's a great picnic. That's my favorite Iced Earth record.
Yeah, it's a great choice for that. It's one of my top two, probably.
It's up there.
What is interesting is that you know, Spawn was very popular at that time. I mean, Todd McFarlane, the writer and artist, was huge.
Yeah.
You know, coming off of Spider-Man, starting Spawn, but Iced Earth were nobody. So it's amazing that whatever they did, whatever deal they made with McFarlane, that he went with that, because, you know, like you said, metal was dead in 1996, and even for the bands that it wasn't, nobody heard of Iced Earth in 1995, 96. I mean, other than the hardcores,
Yeah.
you know, they were nobody. So I remember picking that up, going, "Wow, how did they work this out?"
Yeah, that's a great point, Chris, because they were very much an unknown at that point, and that was a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah, good record.
That was the first album that kind of broke them, I think. It was like Burnt Offerings was obscure. You know, the first two were very obscure, but that one, and that was like the first album
that was
kind
the
of
one.
elevated their status quite a bit.
Absolutely. I'm glad to say that I've gotten to see them perform. One time it was back in a club that doesn't exist anymore. I'm sure some of you were there, where they played the trilogy. They played the last 3 songs on this. And I remember them even saying, you know, we're probably not going to do this again. And it was a small club. There wasn't a lot of people there, and they played all 3, and it was
Nice.
beautiful. Yeah.
Uh,
Being scarred, slave to the dark, and a question of heaven. Oh, I was in heaven.
Nice.
Great album.
Chris, I think you might have at the show. The first time I ever got turned on to Iced Earth was at one of the metal fests in New Jersey. It was at the Asbury Park
Yeah.
Convention Hall.
That was the ones that Milwaukee Metal Fest used to put on.
Yeah,
That was like-
Jack, right?
Yeah, like 99, maybe?
Yeah, 99, 98, somewhere in that.
Something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
that was my first turn on to them, really, and they were like, "Wow!" At that time, you weren't getting a lot of that metal and that style, and they were bringing it. They were
Yeah.
really impressive that night.
For sure.
All right, Ryan, you're up.
All right, so even though this was originally my idea, I changed my mind a million times. But first choice I have is a band from Virginia, very horror based. Wrote a lot of stuff about horror movies over the years. And in 1997, they put out an album strictly about zombie movies, mostly from Lucio Fulci and George Romero. The band is deceased, and the album was Fearless Undead Machines. So it's not about any one particular classic zombie movie, but there was a lot of the famous ones: Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Fulci Zombie, stuff like that. And it's a great album. It's it obviously has lots of samples, a lot of classic samples from Dawn of the Dead that anybody even remotely in horror would recognize. But it starts off with a Silent Creature, which is just a fucking awesome. It's kind of like a mix between thrash metal and death metal at this point. Pretty epic songs, but very well written. King Fowley, the vocalist and drummer at that time, is kind of a well-known character in underground metal. And they had a couple albums before this that were a lot more lo-fi, independent, kind of like underground. But this one was on Relapse Records at the time. And I want to quote. Yep, this was Relapse. I think this is their first album on Relapse. And this is a really good album. This is some really good classic, like death thrash. Even though it's from '97, it has very old school vibe to it. So I recommend it. If you like, I'm kind of dying at stuff to compare it to at this point. But if it's like, if you like old school death and old school thrash, Deceased are great, and this is a good album to start with. So that's my first pick is Fearless Undead Machines.
A very catchy album too, like as heavy and fast as it is, very, very memorable songs. It's probably I think it's my favorite Deceased album still to this day. I got it when it came out. Excellent. They're so underrated.
The follow-up one, Supernatural Addiction, which is more based on like Edgar Allan Poe and Lovecraft. That's probably my favorite, but this one's right up there.
Yeah.
And they still play a lot of those songs live. So they're, it's stuck around in their set list for over 2 decades now.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, I went with a band from Germany, progressive metal band from Germany, who have basically made a career out of doing concept albums, but they have one which is based on a literary classic. It's based on the Count of Monte Cristo from the Alexandre Dumas 1844 novel of the same name, Vanden Plas Cristo. So again, this is basically, it goes by the book. It's a story of a guy who's in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and all of the stuff that kind of follows that. They basically go through the whole thing. This is, if you haven't listened to Vanden Plas, they kind of take the Dream Theater playbook, but they add a lot of power metal elements, a lot of symphonic metal elements, really intricate arrangements, high-pitched vocals, loads of guitar and keyboard solos, pretty heavy, but conceptually just really, really bombastic stuff and really like over the top from a storyline perspective. And you could almost call these like progressive metal rock operas, so to speak. Really fun album. They've got so many great concept albums, but this has always been one of my favorites. And this is from 2006, so it's already 14 years ago that this album came out. But definitely good stuff if you're into like these old school, literary classics, The Count of Monte Cristo. Here you've got probably the only album ever based on that particular story and book. So that's my choice. Back to Chris.
I just want to say I haven't heard that record, but I really like Monte Cristo's when I go to the diner. The stuff, the ham and cheese, and on the French toast, I really like that. So that's really good. But my record is from 2006. This is my the promo copy I had signed by a couple guys in a band. I don't know anything about the. It was based on Dante's The Divine Comedy, and that's way above my head because I just like stuff with boobs and blood. But it's Sepultura, and the name of the record is Dante 21. And this is one of the Derek Green records. And I really like it. I mean, I really like some of the stuff with Derek Green. Some of the songs on here are really good. I saw him on this tour. And if you're not familiar with the Derek Green Sepultura records, this would be a good one to pick up. And yeah, maybe somebody could put in the comments and educate educate me on the Divine Comedy, because I don't know. I know it's like in 3 parts or something, and hell and fire and something biblical and really important, I'm sure, but I don't know anything about it.
It is a good album, though. It is a good album.
It is a good record. It is a good record.
I'd say dude out of that.
You're next,
I don't
Steve.
know anything about that either. I don't know anything about that either. So I was thrown into this, like we said. I didn't really have any ideas. I thought of the Who's Tommy, and it was kind of off subject because the movie came out after. But conceptual albums, that's one of the great ones. Pink Floyd's The Wall. Me and Pete were talking about earlier. I'm on a war kick still, and I'm doing another Sabaton album. I'm doing Sabaton's Heroes from 2014, another conceptual album that was based on actual war, people that fought in the wars. Instead of talking about it, they talked about a certain soldier or something that did something. And one of the ones that struck me on this album was a song called The Night Witches. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with who the Night Witches are or what they were. The Night Witches were a Russian night bombers. They would have like a biplane from World War I, and they would idle them, and they were all female. They would idle them so you couldn't hear the motors come in, and they would drop bombs, and they terrorized the Nazi forces when they were trying to move into Russia. And I did a little reading about this, and it was just it was Marina Raskova. She was the founding commander of the 588th Night Bomber Regiment of the Soviet Air Forces. And you look up, if you're interested in World War II and stuff like that, the German soldiers likened the sound to broomsticks and named the pilots the Night Witches because they couldn't hear, they would just hear the whoosh of the plane as the bombs would drop. And they didn't even carry parachutes. And it was quite a thing that went on and it was, and Sabaton honored him with a great song, The Night Witches. There was also The Ballad of Bull, which is a Corporal Leslie Bull Allen, is an Australian Army soldier, awarded the U.S. Silver Star for rescuing 12 wounded American soldiers during the New Guinea campaign of World War II, where my dad served. So a lot of these stuff was Sabaton. I discovered them a little bit just after my dad had passed. I think he would have really loved them because he was a veteran and liked rock music. He used to work at the store. And Helen Back was Audie Murphy, which is a he was a U.S. soldier, American soldier. He was a songwriter and an actor when he came home, and actually formed the movie. But he single-handedly held up a company of German soldiers for an hour at the Colmar Pocket in France in January 45, and leading a successful counterattack while wounded and out of ammunition. So that's my number 2. And number 1's going to be a good one. So if you're upset with my first pick, first 2 picks, I think you're going to like my number 1. But
that's good stuff, man. I mean, the album's based on historical, events are just as important. Cool.
And they, whether you like them, like Skow hates them, but I mean, these guys are very popular now. They're playing arenas in most of the world. I mean, even here, they were coming with Judas Priest before this horrible pandemic came through. They're one of the newer metal bands that's taking the flag and running it for some of the bigger shows. I'm sure, in Europe, they're big and playing giant festivals. So. And they're all based on war.
Yep.
I mean, once in a while they throw in like a metal diddly of like a metal cover, like honoring metal bands from the past and whatnot, but it's mostly serious stuff. And it's very symphonic, kind of like it's in like with the Nightwish and that type of stuff. I mean, they've toured with Nightwish in the States. So if you're not familiar with them, if you like power metal, check them out.
Wasn't the drummer from Sabaton, isn't he married to Floor from Nightwish?
I'm not sure.
I thought. I could be wrong.
I think you're right.
Speaking of Floor from Nightwish, I saw a video that just dropped today of her doing a
Yeah,
Disney.
let it go.
You
Yeah.
saw it today.
Yeah,
Let it-
she's
let
like,
Let it go or let it go.
yeah, she's like, but she's like 2 years too late. Like, wasn't that Frozen song like really big like 2 years ago?
Well, you know, we've all been stuck in the houses, so maybe she just watched it now. I don't know. She does have she does have a child, so
Yeah.
a year or so ago. So maybe that's why she just discovered it. But I don't know. It sounded okay to me. I didn't listen to the whole
Yeah, it's
thing.
okay.
Anything
It's
she
not
sings is going to be good anyhow. She's an amazing vocalist.
Yeah, no, she's a great singer. But yeah, I think she's hooked up with the guy from Sabaton. I could be wrong.
It's possible. The one guy that joined Sabaton about 2 years ago, he's from an ABBA metal cover band in Sweden.
Oh, fuck, what's the name of that band? Yeah, I remember that band.
That would be interesting to check out.
Right.
ABBA rules. So
ABBA.
I'd rather listen to ABBA than Sabaton, Steve.
We know you don't like him. You won't get it, and you'll never like him because maybe I'm pushing Sabaton just because of you tonight, Skow. And plus, it was right around Veterans Day, so.
Floor is married to the drummer of Sabaton, Hans von Dahl.
There you go.
Here we go.
There you go.
They made Swedish babies over there.
Hans von Dahl. Hans von Dahl is the most European name I've ever heard.
It really is.
Pretty good, pretty good.
All right.
All right, Nick, what do you got?
All right. So from real people sacrificing their lives in World War II to Jrr Tolkien. I'm a massive Jrr Tolkien fan. I have 2 Lord of the Rings tattoos. I've been reading that type of literature, writing that type of literature because I read Lord of the Rings. So as you can imagine, getting into metal in the 90s and hearing about a band from Germany called Blind Guardian that were supposedly doing an epic concept album based on the Middle Earth universe. And there was a whole not being able to get their albums here thing that existed back in those days before the automaticness of the internet. And then finally it came out after waiting for it for a long time, hearing about it, seeing the cover. And the album, of course, is called Nightfall in Middle Earth. And for somebody like me who loved Blind Guardian and epic, amazing power metal with to die for choruses and really great arrangements, and it's still double bass rocked really, really hard. It happens to be the last Blind Guardian album that I ever truly loved. And it is my favorite Blind Guardian album. The source material is the Silmarillion by Jrr Tolkien, which is his biblical, his own world Bible, which explains all of the events and all of the tragedies and wars and loves and stories that set the table for the stories that everybody is familiar with, being the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings saga. So this album particularly takes a look at an elf called Feanor. He was a son of the Noldor king, and he crafted the 3 jewels of the Silmarils, which had the light from the stars in it, which was a very, very significant thing for the immortal elf race in here. And Melkor, Morgoth, the main evil antagonist, stole these jewels from him, and it was a huge war and tragic ending and all this stuff. The album is laced with interludes with people reading narration from I don't know if it's directly from the Silmarillion, but or things that they crafted to sound like it, because which different flavors the music. But one of the problems was that and I looked for a couple quick articles about it to help me with this video, and I really couldn't find any. But I read that Blind Guardian unlike Iced Earth, who were nobodies, they were much more established in Europe and Japan. Blind Guardian was huge. They ran into a lot of problems from the Tolkien Foundation for this album. They had to rewrite lyrics. They were told they could, like, there were so many words and names that they were not allowed to say. And a lot of this centered around Jrr Tolkien's son, Christopher, who has recently passed away. And as much as Christopher preserved his father's legacy and released a ton of, unreleased material from the father, from Jrr Tolkien, I just remember having a bad taste in my mouth about him. Like, the band was just so frustrated. So they can say things like Noldor and Feanor, but they had to like sort of write around some of the other names where they got a really hard time. Meanwhile, all they were trying to do is make one of the best concept albums in rock and metal ever about such an epic topic. So they persevered. The album is beloved, and it is one of the most. I mean, your heart rate cannot possibly stay the same when you put this on. It is so goddamn good that if you guys haven't checked it out, and it brings you right into the world of Tolkien. It just, my Lord, what an album. Amazing.
It's really interesting that they would give them such a hard time because so many bands have kind of mined the Tolkien history.
Yeah.
I mean,
they might have been the best known. I mean, obviously Led Zeppelin is the best known band to probably ever really seriously cover Tolkien's material.
They didn't do it directly though. They
did. They said the word Nazgul, right? Don't they say
yeah,
Nazgul?
it's pretty light, Battle of
Yeah.
They also say Gollum in what song is it? Gollum and the evil one crept away with her. Right? Isn't that the lyric?
Yeah. I gotta grab my album.
Yeah.
It's only like 2 or 3 songs in the whole Led Zeppelin discography. They didn't do a lot with it, just like here and there.
And honestly, they wrote that right around. I mean, Tolkien died in 1973, so they, I don't think like his son was, it hadn't revved up and achieved the, I guess you'd say the prestige that Tolkien was still getting popular in the 60s and 70s. But if everybody wants to check it out, man, Nightfall in Middle Earth, you play songs like Time Stands Still at the Iron Hill, When Sorrow Sang, Into the Storm, the title track, Mirror Mirror, Blood Tears. Bro, that's some of the best heavy metal ever put down. So
Nick, what year was? Because I know I have that record, but I haven't heard it in a million years. Could it have been anything to do with the? They were trying to get the Lord of the Rings movies, so maybe they were being extra protective of it at the time.
That's a great point, Chris, because honestly, this came out in 1998, April 24th, and the movies were being filmed, I want to say, during that time. Yeah,
Right,
or damn near. So yeah, maybe it had something to do with the movies. But they didn't ask to be on the soundtrack or anything. Howard Shore did a beautiful job with that. But it's just one of those little wrinkles in their history that, I just remember reading. I wish I had better material. I looked. It was all print magazines then, but I just remember reading that they had been giving a bit of a hard time. I can't even understand why they
Well,
very original album, very good stuff.
Well, that probably answers it if Lord of the Rings movies are coming out. I mean, dealing with stuff other than music, I know like Stern Pinball worked with Lucas for Star Wars, and man, they couldn't. It was such a hard time for them to develop the pinball with Lucas, and it's anything. If that was going on and they were releasing those as major motion pictures, so they probably wanted to cut or more money out of it to use certain names or as licensing goes. And to answer what Chris said about Led Zeppelin, that's from Ramble On.
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Nice.
All right, back to Ryan.
All right, so I'm gonna piggyback on what Nick said here. I'm going with the band also singing about Jrr Tolkien, but they're much more obscure and a much newer band. And I'm actually gonna do a little shout out here because they're friends of mine. It's a death metal band from New Jersey called Helko, and they put out an album in 2013, I think, much more recent, called Red Dragon. Now this is about The Hobbit, but they're not going to use the name of the dragon, Smog, because probably for the same copyright issues. So this album's actually one long song, even though it's death metal. It's broken up into many different pieces, but it tells the narrative of the Hobbit from the beginning when, Gandalf goes and recruits him, and the adventures they have going to the Lonely Mountain, fighting the dragon, killing the dragon, the battle of the 5 armies, the Arkenstone. So it goes to the whole narrative of the book. But they kind of tiptoe around the names. Like they use Arkenstone, they use Oakenshield. So there's some of the names from The Hobbit, but generally they go pretty light on that, probably for those exact same reasons you guys are mentioning. But this is a really, really good death metal album, kind of melodic death metal. I'm going to say a little like 90s Amon Amarth, old Unleashed, early Amorphous, that, kind of give you some perspective. It's not just like brutal, like bashing death metal the whole time. It's very melodic, very kind of, it's well suited to tell like this kind of music, this kind of narrative tale. Even though the vocals are obviously growled the whole time. There's no clean singing or anything like that. But Michael from Dark Tranquility does do some guest vocals on this. So my second choice is Red Dragon by Helko, which is an awesome fucking album if you like death metal, and I highly recommend it.
I can't believe it's been 7 years since that album came out.
Yeah, it's I was looking through my shelf, and yeah, it's I want to say 2013. I'm going to look it up right now. So I don't.
You're probably right. It just doesn't seem that long. It's like, it's crazy.
It definitely was not recent, but yeah, it's an awesome death metal album. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, good choice. That is a good one. All right, I'm going to go back to 1977. Folks might remember going to a science fiction classic by Isaac Asimov. He wrote this whole robot trilogy. Irobot was basically the story here, a futuristic story about artificial intelligence and how, robots will take over the earth. All right, so that was a million years ago when you really think about it. And that's exactly what we're going through today, right? Who would have thunk it back when he wrote this book that, now we'd be talking about AI, artificial intelligence is like, pretty common. And the album is iRobot from the Alan Parsons Project. Pretty much a classic kind of accessible progressive rock album of the late 70s. Led by Mr. Alan Parsons and a whole cast of characters. Of course, Alan Parsons was the engineer on Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. He eventually wanted to start his own band, and almost every album is a big conceptual piece. Their first album dipped into Edgar Allan Poe, whereas the second album is all about the iRobot story from Isaac Asimov. So pretty cool futuristic tale of where humankind was going way before we actually got there, which is pretty neat. So it's kind of cool to kind of dip back into this album, and it sounds great, the songs are great, but the whole storyline behind it is just it's just so current. It's going on right now, so kind of scary when you think about it.
Sure.
Back to Mr. Allo.
All right, this record I actually meant to plug it the other day. I was saying that the two Bruce Dickinson solo records, which I think are as good as the Maiden catalog. I said Tyranny of Souls and Accident of Birth, but I meant to say The Chemical Wedding and Accident of Birth. This is the regular edition, and then a couple of years later there was a slipcover edition with let's see, 1, 2, 3 bonus tracks. It's inspired by 2 books, or actually it's inspired by the poetry from William Blake and some book about alchemy called The Chemical Wedding. Again, both things are above my pay grade, but Bruce Dickinson is super into alchemy and magic and stuff, so much so that he actually wrote a script based on some of the stuff in this record for a movie called The Chemical Wedding, which came out in the late 90s or must have been early 2000s. And I rewatched it yesterday in anticipation of this. And let's just say he should stick to music because it's a fucking awful movie. But the record, Chemical Wedding, is really good. So if you're got a Maiden fix and you have everything, but you don't have those two Bruce Dickinson solo records, which of course also feature Adrian Smith, Pick Up, Chemical Wedding, and also Accident at Birth.
Those Dickinson solo albums are great.
Chemical Wedding
Unbelievable.
is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing album.
But
Every song on
don't,
that is good.
don't get the movie though; it's terrible.
All right, Steve, you're up.
For my top pick of the night, we're going with a classic. Probably could be the best album I've ever listened to. Rush.
Ever?
Who?
Ever?
Ever. Now I
21.
know. I want to know what it is.
What's better than Rush 2112? There's not much better out there, especially if you grew up in that time. Even if you put it on now and jam that at a party or something and crank that the beginning of that song, it's heavy as hell. But it's Pete gave me the idea for this. It's based on a book, a dystopian fictional novel called Anthem, and in its liner notes, Neil Peart said the genius of Ayn Rand. 2112 tells a story of a city in Megadon in the year 2112 where individuals and creative individualism and creativity are outlawed. With the population controlled by a cabal of malevolent priests. Could they be like politicians here now? No, never mind. Who reside in the temples of Syrinx. And that whole album, not all the songs on that album are based on this, but the whole 2112 epic thing is all about that. And so one of my favorite albums of all time, 2112. I mean, it's hard for me to pick my best album of all time, and that's one of them. I mean, there's probably 100 of my best albums of all time, but that's one of them.
Fucking great.
I mean, Atmosphere should have been number 2. For some reason, I got on the other kick. But
Nothing wrong with that. Great album.
so,
Yep.
Rush. All you Rush fans out there, comment.
All right, Mr. Franco, back to you.
Okay, so my ultimate one here is I'm kind of doing a little bit of a cheat, I guess, because the two albums, while different, are woven by both being based upon the same poetry. And I'm talking, of course, about Amorphous, and they're from Finland, and they're beautiful. In 1996, their third album, Elegy, and the album before that, Tales from a Thousand Lakes. I'm kind of combining them because both albums, and Tales came out in 94, Elegy in 96. Elegy featured a bit of a different lineup, a different vocalist. The music is kind of, very proggy folk, melodic death metal, a little bit of doom. They really are a mixed bag of influences. And those two albums, are two of my favorite albums on the planet. Complete perfection. And so what they're based upon is the Finnish national epic called the Kalevala. And then the other word used is the Kanteletar. And I am any Finnish fans or historians, please feel free to correct me, because I know I'm going to mess the lineage up. But there was a tremendous body of work of Finnish cultural poems that go back centuries. And a man named Elias Lönnrot in 1840, a Finnish poet, compiled them all together. And I believe that is what the band based their lyrics upon. So all the lyrics in these albums are of traditional make, and they, very, very, again, they're translated obviously into English, so, it's kind of obscure, but you get the sense that in Finland, there is a very melancholic relationship with nature and darkness and winter. And obviously these are very metal themes. So it makes sense that a group of high school dropouts, pretty much what Amorphous was, miraculously, the main guys kind of like quit school to do the band and achieved great success. And it's no surprise that they being into death metal and being into all that morbid stuff and the atmosphere of those countries, that they would adapt their own country's culture and history. And, you know, that is something that American, you know, in a young country like America, it's difficult to do that. You know, there are bands that reach back into our, you know, talk about the American Revolution or colonial times, or there's even a couple of bands that talk about Native American lore. But, you know, it's got to be cool to be living in a country with a, you know, multi-millennial history that goes back a couple thousand years that you can draw from. You know, how proud you must be to do that. And few people do it as beautifully as Amorphous, because the lyrics are gorgeous. They are, you know, sad, sort of tragedy tinged poems about how hard life was back then. And you know, if you have any love of progressive rock and metal, and you guys haven't heard Amorphous, those two albums, Tales from a Thousand Lakes and Elegy, would be a great place to start.
Elegy has Posse on vocals, right?
A man named Pasi Koskinen, yeah, who did a great,
Yeah.
and then just kind of,
I loved them.
yeah.
I
He wasn't
remember, if I can make one note, I remember going to the Chance to see Amorphous in the Loft.
Mhm.
You were
I was
there,
there.
right?
I was
Yeah.
there.
And I was totally expecting to see Posse. Still, you may have known that he was gone from the band. I didn't know walking up on that show that night that he was gone.
That was
Yeah.
the first show I
With
was
the
at.
dreadlocks. Who's this guy that's singing for him now? That was all new to me that night. But I love some of the Posse material, and he just disappeared from music altogether, pretty much, didn't he?
Yeah, well, you know, again, I don't want to talk shit on someone who isn't here
Well, no.
to speak up for themselves, but it is sort of like a poorly kept secret that I think he's experiencing some mental issues lately. Pasi Koskinen, and he was a big drinker, but you know what? For his time, he came into that band, and yes, he is one of the main reasons why Elegy is so goddamn great. His vocals are amazing. It was a great move that Amorphous got rid of him when they did. They were running out of steam, and Tommy Utzon's the wave that they're riding from that singer Tommy Utzon that they have now. They're still riding that wave, and it's been 16 years.
Yeah, a
So
long time.
yeah. But Posse did a great job.
Mm.
Good choice. All right, Ryan, back to you.
I was actually just to piggyback on that. I was just listening to Am Universum today by Amorphous, which is like a very 70s rock kind of album. It's not even really metal, but it's great. But my choice, little unorthodox here. So I don't know the entire story about this. I should have looked it up better. My understanding was the 1981 animated movie Heavy Metal, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Blue Oyster Cult was supposed to be more involved in the soundtrack. Now, the soundtrack to that movie, which is still amazing, has one Blue Oyster Cult song, "A Veteran of the Psychic Wars," which, whatever time I heard it, you know, I'm pretty sure I heard "Don't Fear the Reaper" and Godzilla and whatever on the radio. But that was the first time I heard a song where I'm like, "Who the fuck is this?" And I went and looked it up. I'm like, "All right, it's this band called Blue Oyster Cult," and I started getting into them a long time ago. But the album that's from, Fire of Unknown Origin from 1981. There's actually songs on this album which I'm sure were supposed to be on the soundtrack, such as "Vengeance the Pact," because the lyrics directly tell the story of the last segment of the movie, Tarna. And you know, if you've seen the movie, basically, there's this green orb that goes around causing a lot of havoc and destruction in people's lives, and it's kind of very non-linear. You know, there's all these different segments, but the last segment is the best one, where it causes these townspeople to turn into zombies, and they attack another town, and this ancient warrior shows up to swear vengeance. And so the song goes it's that story. So you could tell that there's multiple songs that were supposed to be on the soundtrack, but for whatever reason, which I'm unaware of, never were. So if that was the case, that would have been fucking awesome, because this is a great movie. I love Blue Oyster Cult, and this is one of, I think, their best albums. So you know, there's a couple songs on here like Joan Crawford, which has nothing to do with the movie. Amazing song. Amazing song. But that's my choice for this. You know, I'm actually gonna have to research the story a little more, how that came to be. I'm sure it was just money, you know, licensing, corporate bullshit. Why more of their music didn't get used in that soundtrack. But that is what I'm going with.
Very good. Very good. It's very interesting, actually. I wasn't aware of that until Pete kind of mentioned that you were going to use that this week, and I said, "Well, really? That's that." And now, do you explain that it's all about that movie? I mean, I saw that movie a bunch of times.
It's a great movie. Read the lyrics.
I remember I passed out on the Matamoros Drive-In and passed out on the ground watching that movie one night because that was probably about my 10th time seeing it. So I've seen it a few times before.
Read the lyrics to Vengeance and watch the movie. It's like it's literally they're just narrating what's happening in that scene. So like no shit, it was supposed to be for the movie, but I'm not sure why it wasn't used. But the song they did use was a great song. So and it kind of got me into the band. So no love lost there.
Yeah, they probably were hoping to get 2 songs on the soundtrack and only got 1. With God knows, I mean, Don Henley had his heaviest record ever on there, heaviest song ever on there.
Oh, that's a great Don Henley song too. The soundtrack's great.
It's a
Except for
great
that,
soundtrack.
I hate the Journey song on there. I fucking hate that Journey song. Oh my god!
Yeah,
but other than that, stupid Journey.
Stripes forever.
What's up?
He was giving her the stars and stripes forever.
What was
No, that's
the Journey song on the soundtrack's Open Arms, right?
Yeah, I hate
Yeah.
that fucking song.
Oh, come on, you like that song.
No, I don't. I don't have no problem
You
with
probably
Journey.
cry when you hear it. You light a candle at the show. Come on.
It's got the best Sammy Hagar solo track ever for my money. Heavy metal. That's a great fucking
Yeah,
song.
yeah, that's a good one.
And that Grand Funk Railroad song in there is great too. That's what, Queen Bee?
Yeah, Queen Bee, awesome song. The Cheap Trick songs are awesome.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I understand. I don't want to go off topic here, but I understand that's the first cut of Mob Rules that they did
Yep.
before they reconvened. and recorded the album.
Good note of that. Yes.
Yeah, but it's a separate version of Mob Rules, and it's actually like a little nastier than the actual album cut, a little raw and stuff. So yeah, it's good shit.
Excellent choice.
Good choice. All right, so I'm going to commence us all here today, finish us off with probably arguably the largest selling album that we've talked about today. It's from 1977 by the legendary Pink Floyd, Animals. All right, based on a very popular and a American classic, George Orwell's The Animal Farm, which basically, it's all about animals, but it's all about the different classes in society. And I'll read exactly, the different classes are different kinds of animals. So you have the predatory dogs, you've got the despotic, ruthless pigs, and the mindless and unquestioning herd of sheep. And that's basically what this entire album is based off of. It's pretty clever when you think about it. But not only does this album contain some pretty heavy lyrical themes, but I think the music of the album is just like takes you on another dimension. So I think only a band like Pink Floyd could have pulled something like this off. It's my favorite Floyd album. And I think it's just an absolute masterpiece. And you know what? I've actually read the book a few times. Not in a long time though. I don't know, Steve, we had to read those when we were kids. You remember? I don't know if you ever had to read
No,
them.
I might have skipped that class. I don't know.
You skipped that. Yeah. But funny enough, it's a book that resonates so well today. I mean, those are some of the best like literary classics that here in the modern age, they're just as relevant as they were back then, even probably more so based on all the stuff that's been going on in recent years. But so that's my last concept pick for today. Pink Floyd, Animals. I just since I have it sitting here, one of my other choices that I didn't use today was Horror Show by Iced Earth.
Good one.
That's excellent choice. You told me you were going to use that one.
Yeah,
actually.
I decided not to in the end, but every song in the album is based on a horror film classic character like, the Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Phantom of the Opera, the Damien, the Omen, on and on and on. So that's a classic one too. So there we go. So curious to see if, obviously we've missed some here, but this is actually a pretty tough assignment because there's not a million albums that are have successfully based on these concepts from either fiction, nonfiction, movies, films, TV shows, comic books. A lot of songs. Like I was looking up, there's a ton of songs that are like based on like Stephen King books and stories, but not like full albums and stuff. But I think we came up with some really good choices today. A lot of good insight for everybody. So I want to thank the Hudson Valley Squares here, Ryan Skow, Nick Franco, Steve Keeler, Chris Allo. Tune in every Monday night. Hopefully Lynn Versace will be back with us next week. She couldn't make it today, so we got another topic for you next week. So tune in. Also visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. So for the crew, I am Pete Pardo. We'll see you guys all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night.